the warm up. It says you are live supposedly. So hey everybody, Dave here with Affordable Door and Gate. I got Danielle here, my wife. So she's going to kind of help me along with this whole in the title, the sales, because she's a little more experienced. She has a little more knowledge on it. So, but if you guys come in here and you have any questions, I'd love to hear them. If you got any comments, throw them in there. We'll do our best. If it starts kind of getting, a little bit lengthy, we might just kind of rattle off. We might duke it out. We might fight a little bit, but we're going to see how this goes. So, All right, kick it off with what our question was.
Okay, so we have a question on how to pay a sales-only associate in the garage door business. So that's kind of a loaded question because it's pretty rare for somebody to be sales only, at least on the tail end of the garage door business, in my opinion. So one of the ways, we'll just jump into it. You basically start out with what I would call a monthly draw, where you are paying basically like a base wage to your employee, and let's just say it's $1,000 a month for the sake of easy numbers. $1,000 a month. This associate is guaranteed to go home with that every month. Now, the other side to that is essentially they're commission only. They're not getting an hourly rate. They're not getting overtime or anything like that. It is strictly based off of the amount of sales that they sell each month. So you're looking for consistency or increase in numbers. So if you pay that $1,000 a month, you're looking for them to, at the very least, meet that in their sales. So if it takes 10 sales a month for them to meet that in commission, they really want to do more than that because they want to take home more money. Right?
True.
Everybody wants to take home more money. Let's be real.
Yeah, we've actually have struggled. I did want to bring up, this might not be related, but do you remember when we were doing all the paperwork that we had everybody? We were doing this, guys, at like 9, 10, till 1 o'clock in the morning, a stack of paper. So you got to be.
And weekends.
Yeah, and a lot of weekends. And so you got to, you can consume a lot of time in it. We ran into some problems with our old secretary. What was it? We were having a problem because it wasn't new customers. So we had a problem with her taking commission, was it? Trying to take commission?
Yes. So when we did this, when we first started out, everything that we've learned has been trial and error. It's been simply stuff that we've implemented and either succeeded at or failed at. But either way, we learned. We learned our lesson one way or the other and moved on from it. But we basically had our staff was still hourly. And we were paying a small commission, and we would have each associate that was on that sale, they would get a percentage of the commission, which became extraordinarily tedious because I had to go through absolutely everything. I had to job cost by hand at the time. It was so overwhelming, which is one of the reasons why paying a commission while hourly in this business, I wouldn't recommend it. It's not that you can't do it, but I wouldn't personally recommend it for that reason. It becomes beyond complicated. The amount that you have to micromanage in that situation, I don't even really want to think about that again.
Well, there is systems out there that will help mitigate that. You know what I mean? So there is I don't know if Jobber offers that at all. I think
they do
we do have
a little bit
in there.
But I do know QuickBooks does job cost now as well. So
there's just a lot of setup into it.
Yeah.
And then you got to really make sure nobody's abusing it. I was talking to her before we went on camera, and I was telling her about possibly, the 100% commission.
Mhm.
A lot of times guys are going to like doing that. But if you figure out a percentage that you want to do, it's nice because a couple companies that were my vendors, one of the guy was 100% commission, and he basically didn't have somebody hovering over him the whole time. He made his own destiny. Now you can't really do that, obviously, if he's doing installs as well. You're going to have to find that balance where it's like you're going to flip him off. He's either going to have to turn into hourly. Danny knows a little bit more on it.
So in that case where you have somebody that's going to do partial sales, partial installs, or service, again, Dave said we were just talking about it. I think sometimes the easiest way to start with something like that is to keep your sales 100% separate. And if you have that same associate that is going to do service or installs for you, sometimes the easiest way to just start is to do an hourly rate for that. So that employee needs to clock in and out, when they're doing service or installs. That's just how it has to be. Because in order for you to regulate that cost in there, because it's also something you have to consider when you're paying your sales associate. How much are they getting? What percentage? Is it off of your gross sale? Is it off of the profit? You have to decide what works best for your business in that case. And with that, you're really it's one of those, you kind of just have to start somewhere. The size of your business is going to be a huge thing, because if you have, let's say, one service tech that does typically all your installs and service, and then you've got, this, let's say, new sales associate starting that's supposed to be sales only. What if they sell, if you're normally, let's say, a $500,000 year business, for gross sales, that's going to be a bit of a challenge. If you've got somebody coming in that can sell $2 million worth of sales, do you have any other staff to be able to meet that? Because that can really throw things as well. Which I think we had an issue a little bit with at one point or another, where we had one that was doing more sales, and we did picked up in business significantly. But you also have to pay attention when you have that much going through your business. You also need somebody to keep track of the sales, your expenses. And I'm not talking about just like a bookkeeper or a CPA or anything like that. I'm talking about somebody like a clerical that is in there with the numbers all day, every day. Because if they're not, it would be super easy to end up in the hole real fast, end up in the red.
Yep. And we sometimes fight about this, I think, to this day, probably.
Uh-huh.
And what I've noticed, my opinion always is what you have to do is you have to either do this thing almost weekly, bi-weekly, or by the month at the very least, because unfortunately some people are kind of short-minded, and they need that stimulus. You know what I mean? They need that, because now what would make all of our lives a lot easier is obviously to do it at the end of the year. That'd be perfect. But typically nobody wants to do that with you to the very end of the year, employees especially. So it's a very tough thing to do. Do you want to talk anything about how, I think it's kind of helpful, because she has a certain thing that she did at Jared, how they had where she used to work, how they set up their plan a little bit. And I just think it gives kind of insight of how things were based, in a sense. Do you want to share that?
So having worked in sales, I wasn't a primarily primary sales associate, but I was in the sales industry. And it obviously completely unrelated to garage doors. But for what we would do, our entire store would have a goal of whatever number you want to call it. And then each sales associate had their own monthly goals, which in turn got broken down into daily goals when they had their shifts. And it broke it down a little bit easier, so you had a much more manageable number. Weekends were always really big in the jewelry business. So weekends, holidays, those were always big ones. But basically, the sales associate would get a percentage, and it ranged. So if the store as a whole did not meet their store goal, you would only get, I want to say, 0.5% of your personal total sales. So if I only sold, let's say, $50,000 worth of jewelry that month, but the store as a whole didn't make its goal, I would only get 0.5% of that. Whereas if we made our goal or we exceeded our goal enough, I would make up to 3% of my personal $50,000 sales that I did, which, and that was in addition, it was kind of one of those things. Pay rate it varied. It wasn't just a sales associate got this much per hour as a base rate, basically, and then this much commission. It really forced you to work as a team, but also push yourself as an individual in the sales department. And so I keep that in mind a lot because I really think ultimately it was a good model. I still think it was a good model. Now, jewelry has a way different
300%
markup and margin.
300% markup.
Than
I found out that the hard way.
It has a way different.
Still to this day, it cost me a truck. That's what I always tell her.
Geez.
I paid full retail, and then after she's working there, I could have got it way marked down. So she's worth it.
Yeah.
She's worth it.
I'm always worth it. Clearly, I have all the intel.
So I wanted to ask you, what do you think about? Would it be worse setting somebody up like this for like a subcontractor? Would it make things a little easier?
In what way?
Well, if they're just, let's just say
so like as a complete subcontractor,
it gets gray to me because you turn into, who's providing the fuel? They're out doing sales. You're providing a vehicle. They got a full service vehicle. But if you basically get them set up in a sense, let's just say, and say you're going to either pay, let's say for $5,000, you're going to get a truck, you're going to get a van, whatever it is. But it's your baby now. You're putting fuel, because you know how it is. It's like if they're running around and they're not really closing the sales. It's money.
So, and this might ruffle some feathers, but I would say no to a certain extent, because I feel like if you're going to be driving around doing sales, there has to be a certain amount of skin that you have in the game. It just simply can't always be on the employer, because if it is, it's super easy to have that mentality. It's not my money.
Yeah.
It's not my gas. It's not my truck. It's not my insurance. It's not my tires.
Yeah, this can get really complicated.
It can get so complicated. So my compromise would be they have to have, obviously, a valid driver's license, a reliable vehicle, and if you want to, you could essentially give them a perk, so to speak, of a certain dollar amount towards their cost of doing business, if you will. So let's just say $250, a good starting number. It doesn't have to stay that way, but it's a good place to start where you say that can help cover your fuel, that can help cover your insurance or your tires. And if you notice somebody is driving a whole lot more, but they're also closing a whole lot more sales, you can always increase that number.
So I wanted to bring up the new age here. He had might have been something I was talking about. So what do you think about that, Danny?
I actually don't mind having a flat rate, just a set for each job. Is that what you're talking about? Just a simple flat dollar amount per job that you do?
So that might be something we can come back to.
Yeah.
See what he says.
Answer that question for me, if that's what you mean. But I can start off by saying I don't hate that idea. I think with that, though, you have to take, again, it's kind of one of those things, you have to take on a certain amount of responsibility, because are you getting paid more? How do I say this best way?
Thing is, if you're a flat rate, what gets to me though is this is what I always talk about with that distance. You can't be traveling far either, right? Because that's unfair.
Well,
You know,
right.
I mean, that's unfair.
So, I mean, you basically have to come to some sort of agreement, employer, employee, whether you're flat rate tech or you're an hourly tech. The employer should have some sort of radius that they're working in, and that in the numbers that they put out in bid, then that is where that's where things can vary.
So he's got.
Do we have an answer?
Yeah.
Okay.
So.
Yep. So.
Which is nice.
Yeah. I mean, again, I don't hate that idea. I think it can work really, really well. But you also have to have somebody who doesn't, oh gosh, how do you say it nicely? Who doesn't need help managing their time. Who doesn't need help getting things going when they get to the shop. Do you have to go through absolutely everything, or are they good on their own to get their stuff going for the day? A new door install. Do you physically have to, as the employer or, service manager, it doesn't really matter what your title is. Are you having to go in there first and make sure absolutely everything is there? Or as the service tech, are you going to take the initiative and make sure that the door is there? It's not severely damaged. And if it is damaged, how
question.
bad? Are you going through making sure the springs are there? The springs are right. Do you have all the hinges? Did you upgrade rollers? Did they give you the upgraded rollers if you did?
Hire people that can manage their time.
Right. And that is one of those things that comes into play. If you can manage your time, you're worth more to me. You just are. If I don't have to babysit you, you're worth more.
There can be a lot of babysitting.
And that's across every industry. It's not just specific to garage doors, but if you have to have somebody write out what your tasks need to be all the time and have to sit there and hover and go, did you get that done? Okay, now do this next. If there's not any bit of, I can't even think of the word, but
let's go and see what Tanner
yeah,
has.
Let's see.
Tanner's always got good stuff. You want to read that out?
Flat rate is kind of a double-edged sword, I think, because if they just slam the job in without quality and get paid for it, then what happens if you or someone has to go back to fix it or adjust a job?
Ooh.
So that was going to be the other part of that.
Ooh, that's good. That's good.
I think if you're going to flat rate, essentially you're basically becoming a subcontractor. You really need to take on the responsibility for that. And if it fails, due to, let's say, manufacturer or whatever issue, if it doesn't have anything to do with you as the installer, that's one thing. And you guys can have some sort of agreement written out. And again, written agreements signed by both parties. Always got to do that. You can definitely have that written in there, but again, this is one of those things, as the service tech or installer, you need to be responsible for it. You know, if you are there and you drop the door
True.
and it bends in half, I don't know. I mean, you know, and that's going to be a gray area as well, because there are so many in this business.
It's got a good one there.
We got another one?
Yeah, he was just agreeing with it. You know, the quality usually suffers.
It does.
You know,
It
that's always a
does.
possibility.
It is a possibility. And that is where, if you find somebody,
Texts that do that don't last long. We're out of here.
true.
I get it.
Yep, that's true. No,
You sound like
that
that.
is all. That's true. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, it's really easy to embellish your resume, so to speak, these days. And you just hiring people, it's really, really difficult to find somebody who's good, who cares about the quality of work that they put out. And again, if you have a great attitude, are willing to learn, can retain information, and like just you want to do a good job, you are worth so much more for me than somebody who's like, I can do it, but I'm not touching that.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
Attitude tenfold also, by the way.
I feel like it's a real struggle. It's so hard. It's even so hard for me in the business to change different hats all the time, to turn into sales, to the next day you're an installer. I totally get the idea, but it's like, it really feels like you got to come in dressed that day to do your job, which is, you know, your sales. You're not going to halfway through the day change your clothing, your hat, and now you turn into an installer. It's a really hard balance. Even when you're a professional like myself, I consider myself a professional a little bit, but it's really difficult. It's super hard. That's why we got secretaries, we got the guys. We don't really have to do sales because we're just so ingrained into this business, or into this community in our town.
Yeah.
And like I said, but it's been 18 years, you know what I mean? So it kind of flows now.
It wasn't always that way.
No, absolutely not.
When we got married, even when we started dating, it was basically a year after we started dating, a year after you started the business, essentially. And I mean, there were times where he was working multiple jobs.
Yeah.
You know,
I worked up to 3 jobs.
Yeah.
You know?
There were, I mean, when we decided that I would quit my job, which was almost an hour away each way, you know, there's a lot of things you have to consider. And ultimately, numbers don't lie.
Yeah, if you do them right.
As long as you're doing the math correctly, numbers don't lie. So, and if,
there?
yeah. So, yes, there's the other half of the battle: to find good workers or attention to detail. If you find one and don't need it, send them over here to Iowa. Thanks.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure if I find one, I'm keeping them.
Yeah, take that down. We're taking that
If
down.
I find someone moving to Iowa, then I'll send them your way.
What did so I was trying to think with the new age. I was trying to think if he had, like, what was coming to my mind is I thought, how does that work if it's a flat rate? And like you said, there's a problem with the door, and he didn't drop it or anything. It's just,
Right.
he takes out the packaging. It's like the AMR doors. It's got scratches and everything. Customer comes home right at the wrong time. They go, you know, I want all new, you know, then is it, you know, the same price really to go back and reinstall, or is it kind of a cut down rate? I'm sure you can obviously adjust all this. But it's just, you really got to go through everything.
Yeah.
And I could see, I don't know, go ahead.
I mean, that's going to, again, I feel like that's all I'm saying is it depends.
Yeah, you gotta write all that stuff down and have a kind of a contract. And then I figure if you, like I
you
said, you
really
gotta do
just have
everything
to
in
come
like
to an agreement.
a 20-mile radius.
You both have to be pretty flexible in situations like that, where it's not, you know, and it can be as things come up, because things always come up that we didn't think about. They always do. You can count on it.
I even had a hard time when we did subs. It was hard. It's hard when they do the work and they do install and they do a pretty, you know, decent job. But the customer will call. It just happens, right? They leave a shovel or something in the track, and now the cables are thrown off. And it's hard to get that sub to come back and, do it within a timely manner. Yes. Would you like it to be that way where they'll come in a drop of a hat? But sometimes they're kind of where they live, how far away they are. It's kind of a pain. You know what I mean?
Well, and you also have to consider with your subs, are they, this kind of goes back to one of your earlier statements. Are they using, a company truck with company tools, company gas, or is this their own setup?
Well, if they're a sub, they're
so
supposed
theoretically, if they're a sub, if you're a true subcontractor, it should all be your own.
Right.
They're
supposed to dictate their time and everything.
Yes, one of the definitions of a true subcontractor is that the employer does not have any hold over their time.
Right.
So if you say, I want to work 1 day a week, okay, sure. Yeah. I'll see what I can schedule within that day. If you're like, this week I've got all week available. Okay, great. It varies. Now, on the flip side, they also have to have their own insurance. And depending on who you're working for, again, I feel like we're getting way off track here.
It's somewhat, like I said, if somebody has a comment, they can always throw it in there and we'll
that's totally fine.
I'm still looking at some of my notes. And
by the way, Tanner, I like that your wife is your secretary.
Oh, you seen that?
Because
I'll throw it up there.
Of course I did. Do you think I missed that? Because I do the same thing. And I bet she's probably not just the secretary. I bet she answers the phones. I bet she does taxes. I bet she does behind the scenes paperwork. And she does all sorts of emails and banking stuff.
True.
The reason he gets to do this is because of me. No, we're a team.
I don't know why.
We both have our strengths.
I don't know why I felt like this. I mean, I see where the new age he was talking about the flat rate, so I can see that.
Mm-hmm.
But I kind of wrote on my notes here, and this was just real generic. But I had no commit. You can't do commission on residential. It was just commercial. And I think the reason I thought that was because when I went to Arizona and I worked with the one company, those were a flat rate, but the commercial guys were a hourly rate. You know what I mean? And I think because obviously we know commercial can be trickier.
Typically residential is much more cookie cutter.
Right.
Not to say that you don't have your issues there, because you do, but residential tends to be more simple overall, where when you walk into, let's say, a road commission, a fire station, another commercial building with 14-foot tall vertical lift doors, that's a bit more of a challenge than a simple 9x7 install or broken spring on a 9x7, 18x8 even. Mm-hmm. You're in two different states as far as what it takes for residential in that case versus commercial.
Right.
They're two different animals.
I think another thing, correct me if I'm wrong, but some of this stuff can cause resentment, or friction in the business too, because if you have somebody that's set up,
absolutely,
and they think, people start, learning that they can almost make more for themselves to some degree
especially between staff members, you can easily get that bit of jealousy, tension. And I get that. I truly do. When I was first hired in, I was very young. When I was hired into the jewelry store, I remember my manager then always said, you are actually the employee that costs me the most. He's like, I don't mean that that you are the highest paid, but you cost me the most, because at the time I actually didn't have any sales goals. I was actually what was considered a liaison between the storefront, where the sales actually took place, and the shop where jewelry repairs, setting diamonds, all those kinds of things took place. So I went between the two. So I didn't actually do physical sales. I assisted the sales associates. I didn't earn commission at the time. So even though I wasn't the highest paid, I cost him the most as far as his job as store manager was concerned, and his bonuses and such, because I didn't bring anything extra in. And ultimately that can go for anything. If, realistically, we could even go so far as to say anybody who sits in the office or simply is on the phone is who costs the most, not because they're necessarily paid the most, but because while they can talk on the phone and maybe close a sale, did they drive out there and meet with the customer, see the building, and now obviously there's a fair amount that might have to do with, blueprints and drawing, shop drawings and things like that can be bid based off of those. But a fair amount are replacements. And typically your office staff isn't going out to make those sales.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, that's
it's the service tax. Now I will say
it's almost like really it's overhead. You know what I mean? It's kind of an overhead.
I would just say typically your office staff
it's
is
not
just
that they're not important. It's just
they are very important.
Very important. It's just, but like you said, they're not the one
in a very different way.
They're
very important in a very different way because likewise, they're in the office answering phone calls, sending emails.
Yeah.
Like for him and I, let's just take our dynamic. That is not his area. Don't ask him to do that.
No, I'll screw it up.
That's me.
I can't spell worth of crap. So I will write the names. That's why I had to get voice recorder, and I'd have to have people tell me it twice, or I'd say, hey, spell it out for me. And pulling off the side of the road and cars zipping by, you got to put the headset on. You got to, the secretaries are definitely worth, every penny. If you can afford them. So if you want to read Tanner's here, I think I can speak a little bit on that.
So, and I'd like to add.
Oh, I'm sorry. Hang on. This one.
Wrong
this
one.
Okay.
Wrong. The other hard thing about subs is unless they are good, honest people, at what point do they stop installing for you and start moonlighting your customers with their own product and labor? Yeah. So I would say if you're going to bring on a subcontractor, there has to be a non-compete involved. Plain and simple.
Contract.
It's another contract, non-compete.
Yeah. And here's the thing is like most of the time they're not labeled up. They're just driving standard pickup trucks. Yep. And you can always, just have them, if they want to do their own or something, have them have a sticker or a magnet sticker on there. Mm-hmm. But what I've also noticed, at least for when we were doing it, it wasn't such a big deal because normally it's a residential and they're kind of a one-off. So I did try to stress for them, which they didn't always do a good job, but you could mitigate this with pictures. Have them tell, say when you're done with the job, I want a picture from the outside. I want a picture of the inside. I want a picture of the sticker. I want it labeled with your initials on it. Get the ones that you can have a date on there, initials, who it was, any details, new door install, new opener. And that way, hopefully you're getting that customer in the future. Now, yes, could they peel it off and put their own on there and stuff yes, but more than likely you don't want to bite the hand that feeds you. So you're going to catch on, or you go behind them, spot check them every once in a while. Yep. So residential never really bothered me. Now commercial, that's a little bit different story because commercial's hard and it's hard to trust them and they're not really equipped for it.
I think commercial has to stay in house.
Yeah, there you go. Commercial
has to stay in house. That commercial,
you work too hard to get commercial. You work too hard, and you're in the system
too hard to get those accounts
for somebody to be a rat, basically.
Yep, you work really hard to get those accounts, and
let's see what Tanner had next year. Let's go to the next one.
You guys are quick.
Oh, they can be. They can be jumping. What did he say? I'd like to
add to Tony. I have a local company who reached out to me a few weeks ago about buying them out, but I don't want their door and their equipment and building is trashed.
Let's jump back to Tony. I skipped him. I don't know how I did that, but I'm a greenhorn on this.
Oh gosh. Okay, I have a question. If I'm buying someone else's business, should I get them to sign a non-compete form?
Good question.
Absolutely.
That's true.
Absolutely.
That's true. Me and Tony have been talking a little bit about it. So
absolutely a non-compete and typically non-competes are typically a range from 2 to 5 years. And it's not to say that they couldn't go somewhere else and do it, but you would say, or in our case, we would say, and we could even just bring it more local within these counties. you're agreeing, as part of me purchasing your business, you're agreeing that you will not do any business in this realm. So we're going to say garage doors, gates, gate access systems, garage door openers, all the things that we do, commercial or industrial fencing, you're agreeing as a seller to not compete with what you're selling me within this span of time. It is a must. We learned that one the hard way. It is a must. If they're unwilling, back out. Don't take it.
This was the other one that I jumped too fast.
Oh, I just read that.
No, this one. Tanner was saying I'd like to add, but I jumped you off of it.
Yeah, reach out to you. But you don't want their door, equipment, building as trash, and they rent.
Gotcha. So this is in between those two. Okay.
So at that point, you're really buying the customers.
Yeah.
So you can sign like a non-disclosure agreement interim while you're considering purchasing. So that way, neither of you can disclose what the terms of your potential agreement are. But that should be able to give you access to more personal information, personal business information, like their customer client list. If they've got 50 customers and they're asking you $50,000, well, how much sales are they doing with those customers? Again, the numbers don't lie. You have to play that by ear. But if ultimately their equipment's crap, they're renting a building that's not good, you have to consider that all that stuff is going to cost you even more to build back up. And to me, that significantly decreases the value of purchasing another business.
The problem I think about is what's your opinion on, do you keep the name going of that business, or do you try to change it because people maybe are accustomed to it?
Again, I would say that completely depends upon how big their client list is and how far their reach is. If it's very small and they're asking a small amount, I would consider changing the name. But if it's a bigger name, let's say like Affordable Door and Gate, I would probably keep the name and I would just have a parent company, and it would be a DBA, a doing business as Affordable Door and Gate, and bring it in there, or I would keep Affordable Door and Gate as a completely separate entity.
So I want to read this on the locations.
Oh, the location. List. So all I would really want to buy would be the client list. But at the end of the day, we bid against each other. What am I buying?
True. It's basically tools, trailer, service, or vehicle.
Yeah.
Client list probably.
Yeah, that's really it. And like I said, if you've already looked at that stuff and that stuff holds no ultimate value, and you're already bidding against, if you're looking at buying a literal competitor, somebody who you bid against frequently, I probably wouldn't do it.
It's hard to say. I look at it like
a tough decision.
My first thing in my head is I would want to set them up. I'd look for the future, and the future would be is that I'm going to put another employee in here that's going to run this and be a manager. And so it's just it's its own totally separate entity, its own tax. Everything is just under that. So we can run the numbers instead of trying to blend it in, because I don't know if people are going to be, when they call and they go, well, I think, because some people, how it is, the old people, and am I calling Johnny's garage door? And you're like, no, but we bought them out, I want Johnny, and where you can kind of still play it that, you're just a worker, you know what I mean? Like, you didn't really buy him out. You're just a worker. He hired me type of thing. Cause people just, how it is. It doesn't even matter. You're just here to show up, do a good job, get paid. Yeah. And some people just,
Well, and that's where just keeping the name and having it as a DBA under a different parent company comes into play, because you're still keeping everything. It just is under new ownership. Most customers don't really care. They just want their stuff fixed.
He's older and getting out, so that's 100%. What is CR Performance Store? Different animals.
Yeah, they're different. Commercial and residential.
They are. They really are.
They are very different.
Mr. Sky.
I will say, and he can attest to it here. I always, every time I'd ask any of the guys to do anything, because there was a period of time where I was in the office 100%. It was me answering the phone. It was me making the schedule. You know, he can, if I would never ask any of my techs to do anything that I wasn't willing to do myself. I've been in those scissor lifts with those huge commercial springs. I've been, you know, out there digging holes for fencing. I've been out there, you know, doing gate work.
So I've
done it all.
So on this one, how would you, you know, how do you buy someone's? I kind of want to address this because I know we've had problems with this too. We've bought phones and phone numbers for employees, and you got to almost get it under a contract because these guys get lazy and then they'll start using that phone for like most, you know, they'll get rid of their personal phone, and then it turns in when they get canned or they.
Hold on. Can you clarify, Sky Overhead? Do you mean like an employee's old phone number or another business's
That's what I was
old
going to
phone
get at.
number?
I was going to say both, but that's what I'm saying is
Okay.
I just wanted to bring that up because that made my brain. And so what I'm saying is with employees, but with another business, I was going to leave that to you because
I don't know.
That's a tough one.
I genuinely don't know what the process for that is.
Right. But if you were, let's say we were buying another ones, you know, what would do you want to have? You know, what would be really easy is if it was just a cell phone and they can hand it to you. That'd make life a lot easier, but it might not be. It might be like ours, which is an integrative, you know, internet system basically. And you got to get it transferred over. We got all the access codes VoIP. To it. Yeah, exactly. So I don't know exactly how you'd approach it, but you know, obviously you got to get something kind of signed that you're taking it over. That they're not just going to take your money and then they go, too bad you're not getting the phone number.
Well, and that's kind of,
and those are really hard areas, guys, because were you around for that? We changed the phone number from a cell phone to a landline. And I called the company. I just heard another company. It was an automotive company online talking about this. And they basically, they lost my number for a while. And luckily it was being in transit, but when I called back, I'm like, what's going on? I mean, you know, it's supposed to be an hour. It's been 2 hours. And they go, we don't even know what you're talking about. We don't even see this number. And I'm like, what do you mean you don't see this number? I got 5-6 years in this thing, plaster and stickers everywhere. And you're like some, you know, punk kid's going to get my phone number.
Yeah. I remember. You know? Oh man. I remember when that happened. It was when we first got Comcast Business. It ages me and him, Comcast Business. And we, at the time, the work line, which is still our work number, still our business number, we had to port it over because it was a cell phone. We had to bring it over to Comcast Business. Oh, that was gut-wrenching. The stress, wondering if we're going to get that line back because it was literally nowhere.
Yeah.
All that work, all the customers up till that point, like you said, 5-6 years.
Could be gone.
Every bit of it could be gone.
So Tony was saying he's going to get the 5 years on those clients, getting the last 5 years. So, I mean, it's, you know, something to think about. I mean,
I'd say that's a pretty small amount because it's not just the number of clients. Are they repeat clients? Are they one-off clients? You know, at what point, like, I think you and I are actually just talking about this the other day. You know, with how hard you have to go, you're constantly chasing new customers in this business, new sales all the time. Nothing is pretty much ever continuous, you know, repeat, except for commercial. And even then, that can be a little bit, you know, flighty, if you will.
Yeah, people leave or whatever.
For sure.
So New Age, salespeople should have a background.
That's a great one. It really is because it is super easy to be able to say, we can do this. But if you've never gone out there and done it.
That's true. That's a good point.
You have no idea what you're promising for your service tech to do. If you've never been out there, and it could always be a simple requirement. You're required 3 months on the job before you start selling. And you pay them an hourly rate while they're on the job, unless they can prove without a doubt that they have experience in installing and quality installing. because anybody can try and put up a door. I mean, I can put up a door. It's going to take me 1,000 times longer than him. Let's be real, because I'm just not that fast at it.
I've noticed in the businesses too,
but I can make it
that
happen.
a lot of guys, even if they're a little bit bigger, there's typically a male. I've seen a lot of males answer. And then, or if there is a secretary, the secretary will kind of drift off, she'll answer certain things, but if it gets kind of technical, let me let you talk to, Kevin
I
or
did that a
Jim
lot.
or whatever, what I mean? They direct you off. So,
well, and there's nothing wrong with.
Well, it's just hard because we're the ones out there. You know
well,
what I mean?
No, I know.
So we know exactly what kind of goes on when people can tell us certain little details.
Well, I know that, but as somebody who's answered the phones before,
Yep.
I can say the amount of times that I had customers ask me questions, I would say, I genuinely don't know the answer to that. Let me see if I can get a hold of a service tech, and I will call you back.
Or shoot ask
I
for
will
pictures.
have one of the service techs call you back with an answer that I'm just not out in the field enough. I can't give you a good answer.
Yep.
And sometimes that's all they need to hear is that I don't have the answer, but I can find somebody who does.
So Sky said it. He was talking about a business that's going out.
Oh, okay.
I was mentioning it to actually Tony earlier. We were talking about, I would have paid at least $1,000 for one of them. That was a very well known. It's been around here for 30 some years. And it was a huge company at one time. They split off, but there was still the one phone number, and they had metal plates even on the garage door. They were really cool looking. And the guy that finally did it, he was kind of an alcoholic. He worked out of a van, and he finally canned it, and he went and worked for a shop, and he just let the phone number go. I was so bummed, but I would have probably gave him $1,000. If I could have got it cheaper, that'd have been great. But just to have that phone number of people calling in and saying, "Hey, I'm looking for this." Oh, that's okay. Hey, we switched over. They went out, but we bought them. We can still service you because I seen them everywhere. So it wasn't even like I had to do any research, because I don't really know how you trace something like that for people unless you can see in their list and pictures. But I just knew from a technician from being out there, I'd see it out of, 3 out of 5, I do 5 doors, 3 of them had it on them,
Yeah, I would say kind of along those lines though, if buying a phone number, try to think about that as advertising. What are you willing to spend on advertising? Because now you've got this phone number that all these other people may or may not be, coming to you when you buy that phone number. So essentially that's like a one-time fee advertising, really.
Kevin, I can agree with Kevin on this one. Not always, sales guys. This is why this gets really great, guys, because this is why I started learning, and I had to kind of teach Cap this too. I said, you gotta, whoever's going to install it needs to go out there and detail it. So that way it's on them, because they see, I've had it happen too, where you go out there and it's a foot short, you unpackage the door, so make sure you're doing that too. Make sure you measure your garage doors. If you weren't the one out there originally detailing it, and you still should just do it again before you even get it out of the truck or the van.
Yeah.
Because I've been there, I ripped all the packaging off. I set the panel up, and it's like, oh, it's got to go this way. Oh no, it's got to go. Holy crap, it's a foot or 2 foot short. This thing's not going to work, and now it's embarrassing. It's money, it's time.
Yeah. I mean, that's totally true, Kevin. I mean, I always try to look at things and go, everybody makes mistakes. We still make errors to this day. We're human. We all are. But what you're looking for ultimately is, are they always the same mistake? And how frequent are the mistakes? Because if they're not learning from them, they're like, we had somebody that we hired, I don't know, 6-7 months ago or something like that, that just made continuous mistakes. I mean, he seemed promising at the time. But after getting into it, just hearing from our lead manager that was, constantly out with him and all that kind of stuff and overseeing everything, it's like, he's not getting it. He's not listening. He's not changing anything.
Does this, Is that big? I never heard of that. We don't deal with SIM cards hardly anymore for us. Everything's built in the phone.
We have SIM cards.
We do?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. But is
So
that
they all have SIM cards.
get a double?
Huh.
I mean, that's new to me.
I have literally never heard of that. So
Huh.
elaborate on that, Tony.
Yeah, like I guess is it just
I've literally never
like
heard
you
of
get
that.
two of them and I could just have two and I could put one in your phone eventually and yours will ring too? Or because
No.
if that was
I
the
don't.
case,
I don't let business stuff come to my phone.
No. But I'm just
Ever.
saying that'd be great if you could do that because
Yeah, that'd be pretty cool.
I've had that where we've had to forward the phone where it's like if I can't catch it, somebody else. Where if you could
Yes.
have two phones that are ringing,
Mhm.
hopefully somebody catches it, but I don't know if it's glitchy or not.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Let's go. This one I think is the next. I think. What do you got there?
Yeah. Yeah, you'd be more than last 5 years. So you'd also have their doors that are stickered. That's true, Kevin. Totally true.
All right. Let's see what Tanner. You want to read it?
Yes, nothing is guaranteed. I worked for a company who has been in business for 20 years, not an owner operator, but out of town construction company owned. But I am going on year 5 to 6, and I regularly get.
He might have more right here. Sorry.
Their customers and contractors only because their quality is lacking. We install for someone once and usually keep their business. Got to do good work, and the rest will take care of itself. That really. I think people a lot of times underestimate these days the power of good work. I would say affordable door and gate is not necessarily the cheapest.
No, we picked the wrong game.
Yeah, we are not really affordable. We are out to do quality work. And I mean, the amount of times even customers have wanted us to cut corners. And, there have been times that we've done it with the stipulation, there's no warranty. We're not going to warranty something like that. We'll do it for you, but you also have to consider nowadays there's so many safety standards and all that kind of jazz that goes along with it. Are you going to get the 4-letter, people in there?
Yeah.
That are going to fine you tons of money? Let's see.
So I don't think there's really a miracle.
There's not a miracle.
Pill for it.
No. Kind of skipping back to our original topic of, how to pay, ultimately how to pay a sales associate fairly. Just some other little notes that I had written down. Something like, what is the average income in your state or city that you do business in? What's the cost of living in the area in which you do business? Somebody out in California is going to be totally different from somebody here in Michigan. It is vastly different. I think we were looking at a chart, something like the average home cost in California is like $740,000 or $760,000. And here in Michigan, what was it? It was like,
that sounds cheap.
it was like 320 or something like that.
No, I think we were like 250.
It could have even been lower, to be honest. But that's my point. The cost and what you're probably going to get paid out in California is going to be more, but the cost of living is significantly more out there too, versus here in Michigan. So those are things you have to consider. You have to consider your overhead costs. So this is going to come into play if you got a true subcontractor or if you've got a W-2 employee. If you've got a W-2 employee, you have to consider all of the insurances, your workers' comp, because that's a requirement, your general liability insurance. When you're talking overhead, you're talking about your phones, your phone numbers, your internet bills, your computers, your softwares that you use, your like for us, Jobber, QuickBooks, your accountant, your tax preparer, all of those things. You're gonna have to talk about your employer liability taxes. Those things all get factored into your overhead, and there's a lot that goes into it. But those are things that have to be considered as well. and whether you're going to decide to go, base the commission off of gross sales or, profit, really. Let's see. I put a note that your sales associate will have to be somewhat responsible for bidding correctly. So, they can't just throw out a low number to get the job and get the sale. They're going to have to bid it appropriately for the time of year. Are you going into winter? Do you have winter where you're at, truly? You got snow flying? Are you like in Michigan where it can be, I would say average between 5 and 20 degrees throughout the winter, though this year was unseasonably warm? Or are you like in Minnesota where it's like -30?
Some of that stuff
in some places you have a lot to consider.
Some of that stuff gets really hard. So you gotta, if you're just doing cookie cutter residential garage doors, that's a lot easier. But see, like for us, we do the fence, we do the gates. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, you got to almost got to have it where here's the material, you factor in some labor, you factor in some other things. And then it's got to be, I like the margins. So you do, everything's going to have a 10% margin, or it's going to have a 20% or 30 across the board, basically, unless you talk to owner, manager and say, look, this is a new customer, or we beat on it. If we knock it down to 25%, we could get this job still, but they have to understand that they're set at this, because you got to have something to go back on them too. So that's why it's really great on what you're doing. If you, like I said, if you're just doing, I think residential installs is a lot simpler, but for us,
it is.
We deal with fence, we deal with gates, we deal, with the commercial.
Yeah. And we deal with so much across the board that at this point, having somebody who's 100% commission based is unrealistic.
Let's see here.
We would like to get to that point where we have somebody who's dedicated to sales, completely. But we have so many irons in the fire, so to speak. We've got goals. We've got goals for business and for life.
There you go.
And have goals. We constantly talk about it. I'll beat them up about it all day long.
Yeah, for sure.
And I certainly don't do it like I should, but write down your goals.
I lost my spot. So let me let me know what the customers, contractors, there's quality lacking installs. Someone can usually keep their business got. We didn't get this one, did we?
Yeah, I read that.
Cool. On to the next. No, sir. Don't want cheapest good work. Good. Moving on.
Yeah. That's true, Tanner.
And then my daughter. Okay, so I don't think we did Tony here.
You have to do Sims. Okay. Tony says, my daughter looked it up online and said when you put two phones together, you have to have a double SIM card. I don't know.
Wow.
I'm right with you, Tony. I don't know.
Tony's above my pay scale.
You learn something new every day.
That'd be cool.
Yes, some companies do want additional umbrella insurance too. All things to be considered, Kevin
got here.
Yep. Kevin says we are higher priced too. We want to do it better than our competitors. Customers want it cheap. Are usually customers you don't want. Bingo.
Nice.
Bingo.
Nice.
We want the customers that want it done right. And that's it.
Minnesota, man, it gets cold there.
It does get cold. It's too cold. Yeah. I've heard there's some very, very, very beautiful places to visit in Minnesota, though.
Okay. Let's do Doc.
Not anymore.
No, I talked about that. Who was I talking to that about?
Not anymore.
I think I was talking about the last live stream.
Oops, sorry. Yep. I just shook the desk.
Oh, you're good.
The desk.
It was snowy and wet today.
Low headroom. Ugh.
Hey, at least you were inside.
Yes.
That's always, at least you weren't working on a gate or a fence. That's really miserable.
It is.
Oh, here we go. With the belts. Do you like it?
$87.50.
Do you like it? Hopefully you like it. I'm relying on you guys for these residential openers.
Yeah.
Hey, there's Julio. Julio, you're supposed to send me a picture. You got my phone number? You're supposed to. I want to see that truck.
Yes. It is very, very, and I will say there was a point in the business where
everything was new to me. I wasn't taught about owning a business. Neither of us really were, but
Could you read it to me?
it says, I find it astounding that many business owners are unaware of their overhead costs. It was an embarrassingly long amount of time before we realized what our overhead costs were.
That's a lot.
It was a lot. And it was truly, I think it really started when we truly wanted to do better financially, not just for us, but for our business, for our employees, but for our kids. We want better things for them in their life, and don't want them to have to struggle. And we want them to have the awesome knowledge and
It's really
teaching them about money, and that, we've got one of our daughters is doing her own thing.
It's really tough because you look at it and you got to remember this is a garden.
Yep.
You know what I mean? There's a lot of people working on this garden.
Yep.
And there's the extended. That's why I'm always kind of saying you got to put on the oxygen. I can't say a word.
Oxygen mask.
Yes, put it on first before you can help others. And
Yep.
it's hard for some people because some people as employees and stuff, they sit there and they just keep, hey, I need more. And it's like, well, but what are you producing more? Are you being more efficient? Are you using your time wisely? Instead of just doing 1 or 2 installs, are you hitting 3 or 4 today?
Just because you're busy doesn't mean you're profitable.
Yes. There's a lot that goes into that.
I always like to tell him, you can sit at home and lose less money.
Sometimes
Sometimes that's truly the case. But again, as far as overhead costs go, we're teaching our kids to job cost, and our oldest is 13. So we want them to go places with their desires.
So they go past the limits.
Ugh.
You want to read it out?
The 87504 goes past the limits when you set them sometimes, and they take a long time to take apart.
Great.
More time, more money.
That's LiftMaster, baby.
More time, more money.
That's
Isn't that
LiftMaster.
everything?
Yeah.
I miss the 8550
I
W.
do. I do, man. Simple, man.
Yeah.
It's just, like I said, sometimes this stuff is always evolving. So it's really tough.
Oh, I miss the old school openers.
Oh man. I always tell them about the mechanical limits. I had really good luck because I've said this before, and since we dealt with a lot of the Amish, I always knew once we unplugged it, you come back in 2 weeks, 2 years, it's going to keep the same limits. And it just seemed like it never lost anything, where a lot of this electronic stuff. Yeah. Just the commercial. So do you got any more that you want to add that we can kind of help these guys out with? Like I said, it's not a complete, but hopefully you can take some notes from this a little bit, and it can kind of open up your mind that, hey, we don't even have the perfect solution, but there's just, whatever you do, you got to basically write it down. You got to get a contract. Yeah. What?
No, it just kind of along those lines. Again, one of my notes was, if you're paying on gross sales, my opinion is it's ultimately less you need to keep track of. As far as micromanaging the costs, if you have to calculate your commission by hand and the good old brain,
I wish I had a sheet for these
sales.
guys of what they used to have to go through and do what the cost of everything was.
I can find it.
How many trips?
I bet I can find it.
Yeah.
I'll find it. Maybe.
If you ever want to see one, just let me know or email me, or
yeah.
I'll try to find one for you. But it was, like I said, she would sit on the floor at night in the living room and just go through these things. And
stacks.
It was
multiple stacks like this, just full of your normal printer paper. And I would have to comb through absolutely every detail. How many trips were made? How many vehicles made that trip? How many guys made each individual trip? Who touched that job? Is it legitimately, it was somebody supposed to be on this job that wasn't, or vice versa? So many things to consider. Side note, in regards to how many people are on a job, one of the things was assigning customers to the sales associate. So if I was a sales associate, I would have a certain group of customers that are mine. I'm responsible for tending to their needs. I'm responsible for bidding jobs for them. And unless I'm on vacation and they literally can't wait, then somebody else will come in. But otherwise, it's on me. They're my customer. And if for some reason their needs aren't met, you know, that's on me, not on Dave, because they're not his customer.
Mhm.
You know, so that can be a really easy way to kind of, if you've maybe got somebody that's an hourly, W-2 employee, you can move them over to sales by starting to assign them customers. So, and you kind of got to train the customers. It took a while for us when they were always used to calling him. I mean, literally, they were used to we'll just go straight to the source. We'll go straight to the source. We'll bypass everybody else and we'll go to him. And it took a long time, but you eventually have to train the customer and say, you know what? Joe Smith is your sales, your representative. So he's going to be tasked with answering any questions you have, any bids, anything like that. You actually want to call him directly. If he's out of the office or, on vacation or whatever, he'll direct, his voicemail or whatever will direct you to who you should speak to about any, ongoing jobs and such.
Mr. Sky, always appreciate it. He says we rock. You two rock.
Thanks.
Yeah. And then so Julio, I got him the
Julio.
number. How do you say it?
Julio.
Julio? Is that how you say it? Julio, text me. Let me know. Say it with an H. So you have to say how you say it, Dave. It's Julio. I've been saying Julio the whole time. He's like probably just sitting there. God darn it. I screw up names all the time. I really apologize. I think we're going to wrap this up, you guys. I appreciate you guys being here. I really appreciate all the questions. If you think of anything, probably the email. I don't think these show up so good for live streams for any comments on the videos. I think it conks out, to tell you the truth. You can't even do anything on it. But you can always hit me up. I typically put it in the description. I don't know if I did on this one, but it's the Dave A. Dubson at gmail.com. So Dave A. Dubson at gmail.com. You're more than welcome to email me any questions. I'd love to help you out on it. And Danielle, thank you for being here.
Yeah,
I appreciate it.
Thanks
I think
for having me, Hutch.
You're a great help, because this stuff, like I said, I couldn't do it without her. You guys, I am really serious. She does a lot for me.
No, we're a team.
Yep, that's for sure.
We try to do it all together. He's got his strengths. I got mine. His is physical strength.
This is it. That's it.
Mine is all the writing and the numbers.
She's smart. So, all right, we're heading out. Love you guys.
Bye, guys.